By this time next week, all the votes in Thursday's election will hopefully have been counted, and we'll know who the new 462 councillors across the 11 council areas here are. Over the past few weeks, we've heard from all the main parties on The View and here on Sunday Politics. And on our Red Lines podcast, we've been discussing the prospects and challenges for unionist and nationalist parties. This week, we took a closer look at the others, the parties that don't align themselves as unionist or nationalist. And here's a flavour of the conversation.
Well, a repeat essentially of what happened in 2022, basically being swamped by the Alliance surge, for want of a better term. So Alliance go into this election on 11.5% of the first preference vote. They elected 53 councillors last time, which was one of Alliance's strongest performances. They gained 21 seats. The Green Party go into this election on 2.1%. They elected 8 councillors, which again was a very strong performance for them. They made gains in Belfast and also in Lisburn and Castlereagh. And People for Profit also had a strong election. They go into this council election on 1.4% of the vote. They elected 5 councillors, again with gains in Belfast and Derry, which are the only 2 council areas where the party has representation at this time.
Suzanne, we're just to be absolutely clear for people listening, we're not saying that the parties we're talking about today are in any way a caucus with shared policies and goals, just that they're not readily identifiable as nationalist or unionist, but they are fascinating, and how people vote for some of the parties we're going to talk about today will really shape the outcome on the 19th, 20th and 21st of May.
Totally. I think Alliance go into this election a lot more confident than the Greens or People Before Profit. I think both the latter parties would be happy if they just held on to their existing positions, saw their current councillors returned. But Alliance is looking to make significant gains. And if we look at 2014, there were twice as many SDLP councillors as there were Alliance councillors, 3 times as many Ulster Unionist councillors, and oh, what a difference a decade makes. I think regarding the SDLP, the Ulster Unionists and the Greens, Alliance smells blood, and it thinks that it can really eat into those parties' votes and win new councillors at those parties' expense. I think it's also worth saying that Alliance's machine is really strong. Its internal party infrastructure leaves the SDLP and the Ulster Unionists just kind of standing, and also it's going to benefit very much from transfers. I think it was 9 out of 17 Alliance MLAs were elected in the last count in last year's Assembly election, so we're going to see in those final seats a lot of Alliance councillors coming in. But if we look at one of the party's strongest area in Belfast, Ormiston, it's running 4 candidates, and I think that's a first, and in many ways it's a declaration of war to Alliance's political rivals.
There's obviously a big effort on the part of Alliance as far as Mid-Ulster is concerned, which is the one council area where the party has no representation. Somebody just sent me a photograph of an Alliance canvass in Dungannon this week, and I think I see 16 people in the photograph, including Naomi Long, David Ford, Kelly Armstrong, and a lot of other very well-known faces as well.
I think you only have to follow Naomi Long's Twitter feed this week to find out where they feel they're weakest in terms of the battles that they have to face, because she has been to all those areas, particularly in the West, where they know that they're going to face a battle to get over the line through those transfers to be able to build their profile west of the ban. So, as I say, that, as you say, that photograph and photographs like that circulating all the time, because that's where they're directing their energy.
Well, I mean, their best performing DA in Mid-Ulster District Council was actually Dungannon last time, and that was 0.4 of a quota, so that was the best for them. And as Enda was pointing out, when you're west of the ban, apart from Omagh and apart from Faughan in Derry and Strabane, there wasn't really much else to write home. But even last year in the Assembly election, I think by my tabulation, 80+% of Alliance's vote is still east of the ban in the eastern constituencies of Northern Ireland.
I don't think that's going to change at all, David, in this election. I think they're looking at maybe 2 new seats in Fermanagh and Omagh Council, 2 new seats in Derry and Strabane, but their strength, where they're really going to continue to build, is in the east of Northern Ireland. I've spoken to people in Lisburn and Castlereagh, and they're talking of potentially up to 6 new council seats, and as David said, even probably potentially becoming the largest party on that council. They're talking about becoming potentially the largest party on Ards and North Down as well. They see the Greens weak there from the last Assembly election, and they're looking to strengthen Stephen Farry's bid next year to be re-elected as MP for North Down. South Belfast is also really important to Alliance. It overtook the SDLP there in last year's Assembly election, and it's looking now to do the same in terms of councillors, and that will then put it in a position to challenge for the Westminster seat.
Let's move on to the Greens. We've talked a lot about the Alliance Party for very good reason, but the Greens have a real challenge here, David, this time round, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, the Greens were, I think, the big surprise of last year. I think most of us were expecting either one or both of their MLAs to be re-elected, and that didn't happen. But they seem to get that. If you ever talk to people in the Greens, they seem to understand that. Someone who is under real pressure in this election and who is in a marginal seat is the Green Party leader, Mal O'Hara, in the Castle DA, which is in North Belfast. This is a fascinating three-way contest for that seat. Sinn Féin are trying to get 2 seats there. The SDLP are trying to hold their current seat, and the Greens are trying to hold the gain that they made last time. So the Greens sit on 0.5 of a quota. The SDLP sit on 0.7 of a quota, and Sinn Féin sit on 1.7. Now, Sinn Féin are gunning for 2 seats in the area. The SDLP are fighting hard to hold on to their seat. And again, it'll be interesting to see, can Sinn Féin make it 2, or can Mal O'Hara hold off a challenge, a very strong challenge from these other parties in this area? Because, of course, the Green Party lost 1 leader last year to electoral defeat. They don't want to repeat that and have 2 leaders in a row losing to electoral defeat. So Mal O'Hara is going to be fighting very hard for that.
I think part of the difficulty for them too is the fact there's going to be a very crowded transfer market this time round. The very fact that Alliance are running so many more candidates this time that whenever people come to transferring their votes, those extra Alliance candidates will hoover up the 2s and 3s, and it will leave the Greens, I think, with very little to play with in terms of trying to get their people, keep them in the race for long enough.
Well, this is what the Greens are kind of punting on, but you need to have a good enough first preference to stay.
And that's absolutely critical.
Yeah.
I mean, we keep making this point, and let's make it again, which is we talk about parties that are transfer friendly. You're only transfer friendly if you get enough first preferences to stay in the race.
And Alliance learned that lesson the hard way for many, many, many elections, and that's what the Greens effectively need to do. They need to get a high enough first preference in order to get transfers from the nationalist parties, but also they're actually transfer friendly from many of the unionist parties as well. And from talking to the Greens over the course of the campaign, there does seem to be a bit less nervousness. They were very nervous going into the campaign. They're a little bit less nervous now. Now, bearing in mind, they thought they were going to hold their 2 Assembly seats last time and potentially pick up as well. So you have to caveat that. But you're absolutely right in terms of getting their vote out. And, you know, last time, climate change, there was an issue about that. I did follow Mal O'Hara for my sins around last time in 2019, and climate change was resonating on the doorsteps that he went and knocked, and he did talk about the climate emergency. But as has already been pointed out, when other parties have brought that in, and once the Climate Act has been passed, there is a tendency with a lot of voters to go job done. So it'll be interesting to see that.
And it's easy to forget because only last Sunday, I think Claire Bailey's legislation on safe zones around abortion clinics came into effect in Northern Ireland, but we didn't hear much about it. You would have thought there is something for the Green Party to champion, albeit they're reminding people that they've lost their party leader from before. But it shows how the party can actually make a difference, small and all as they were at Stormont.
Well, the interesting thing is I think the Greens ran very heavy on social issues last time, and that worked so well for them in the past. But as those issues get ticked off, it wasn't a ballot box question for many voters. So this time I did notice from their leaflets that I've seen, it is very much on local council issues.
One of the issues they are bringing up is drug addiction, and basically they're saying that on abortion and on same-sex marriage that they actually led the way. And in terms of legalisation, this is another thing. They say we're up for having awkward, difficult conversations. We're not followers, we're leaders in the public debate.
Let's talk about people before profit. 5 seats in 2019. That's an increase of 4 on 2014. And interestingly, David, 3/4 of the gains people before profit made in 2019 were at the expense of Sinn Féin.
Yes, absolutely, which Sinn Féin were not very happy about. I was in Belfast City Hall when they gained that seat in Collin, and the party leadership, Michelle O'Neill and Mary Lou McDonald, were there just as they lost that seat. And Sinn Féin, there were a lot of very glum faces around at the time. So let's take a look at some of them. Fiona Ferguson, even though she she didn't gain from Sinn Féin, but she won a big victory in Old Park. She did this on just 0.3 of a quota. This is a story of, again...
It's remarkable.
Yeah, it's about being... She got less than 500 votes, but again, Paul McCusker's huge surplus came down and really lifted her and helped her, and she gained that seat. And again, it really was a story of being transfer friendly. Fiona Ferguson, again, she's typically up in front of you anytime there's a People for Profit interview. She has built her own kind of profile on that. She typically fronts up for People for Profit whenever they need a spokesperson. So again, be interested to see how she does, being an incumbent going in this time. Someone else to talk about in Belfast is Michael Collins. He got elected in Collin. This was again from Sinn Féin. This was something that Sinn Féin were very surprised about. He sits on 0.9 of a quota. That's another fascinating race because Sinn Féin are desperate to get that seat back. But again, the SDLP incumbent councillor stepping down there. So again, that'll be an interesting three-way contest between Gerard MacDonald of the SDLP, Michael Collins of People for Profit, and Sinn Féin, who are trying to secure a gain there as well. And someone else just worth mentioning, if we go up to Derry and Strabane, which is People for Profit's best performing council area in Northern Ireland, Maeve O'Neill is standing in the Moor. She goes into the selection on 0.8 of a quota, but she was co-opted into that seat from Eamon McCann, who again, very well known personality in his own right, again played very well on that left-wing Derry side of politics. It'd be interesting to see, can Maeve O'Neill hold or improve on Eamon McCann's vote up there?
Suzanne, what do you think a good result would look like for the party?
Realistically, I think it would be getting their existing councillors returned, and particularly Fiona Ferguson in Old Park. I think all effort will be made into trying to see her re-elected in Old Park, but it's going to be very, very tight in that one.
I think last time round, People Before Profit and Derry capitalised on the fact that Sinn Féin was in such disarray. Let's not forget the party lost 5 council seats in Derry and Strabane. Last time round, Republican Nationalist voters went elsewhere, if you like, and voted for people like Eamon McCann at the time, who since stepped down, and obviously Sean Harkin as well. So I think they cashed in on that. So being able to hold on to that vote this time round, I think for People Before Profit will be a big measure of success.
And the institutions being down works massively against them, because in reality, just as Enda's saying, they are competing for the same mainly working class nationalist vote as Sinn Féin. And you know, I think maybe they've taken a stance very much against the monarchy, against going to the coronation, but probably that the feeling against the DUP in those working class nationalist areas is stronger than any reservations people may have in terms of Sinn Féin's position in royalty.
And you can hear a longer version of that discussion on the Red Lines podcast, and that's available on BBC Sounds or wherever you get